Field sharpening, the do's and the don'ts, and a few little gadgets to help you on the way. Right then, these are my opinions. Other people's opinions will differ. This is my opinion. Zero Scandi grinds. Don't field sharpen them. Seriously, don't. I've done it a few times, and I've done it for my pal who's had little catastrophes or hasn't sharpened his knife in ages, so I've ended up doing it on a camping trip. And if I'm going to field sharpen a Zero Scandi, I wouldn't entertain anything else unless it's a big stone than these DMT diafolds. These are great. They're not cheap, but they're great. Coarse and extra coarse, fine and extra fine. Now, they won't put an edge on as polished as what you're going to do at home on your stones. That's a fact. They're just not going to. Extra fine and then a strop will do enough of a good job to see you through the rest of your trip. But my personal opinion is, unless you really know what you're doing and you've practiced it, don't bother. I've got 2 Zero Scandis with me today. I've got my posh knife. Yeah, it's posh, in Dharma steel. There's no way on this earth that I would sharpen that up in the field. I just wouldn't bother. Oh, 1 Scandi grind? Yes, I would. But I'd still prefer to do it at home. So, that's my opinion. Zero Scandi grind, leave it alone. Know the edge's limitations and don't exceed them. Save that blade for cutting wood. You know, I sometimes see people with an enamel plate or something and using their Zero Scandi grind. I've seen this and it drives me nuts. And cutting meat or whatever on that plate. Well, you are destroying that edge. If you're going to cut food up, use a folder, use a dedicated kitchen knife, cheap Mora. Just don't use a really nice Zero Scandi grind. Just don't do it. I spoke the other day about the differences in bushcraft knives, survival knives and utility knives. And one thing I did say was a utility knife you should be able to sharpen it easily in the field. So I brought that very knife with me and I'm going to field sharpen it now. As I said in the last video, this has got a micro bevel on it, and it's quite a pronounced micro bevel on this one. Got a couple of options. I either use my good stones, or I've got a diamond rod, and I've had this some years. Basically, the easiest way to sharpen a secondary bevel or micro bevel in the field is one of these. It is that easy. Then put it on a strop. It literally is that easy. And it shaves. Simple, simple. It's not brain surgery, it's simple. Now I know a lot of people are fans of the Falkniven DC stones. So I've got the small one here, the DC3. Now I do find when you get these new, the diamond side is really rough, and it takes a bit of use to get it down to basically where it should be. So what I would do with one of these, lay the bevel, lift it a little bit, now when you're doing it this way, with the circular motions, what you're affecting is a convex grind. Because you're not keeping your hand actually at that same level all the time, you are making a convex grind, which is fine on a utility knife. You don't want that on your zero Scandi. Don't neglect the tip. Now I can feel with my thumb, I got relatively hard skin on my thumb. I can feel in my thumb, that's quite an aggressive edge now. So I'll flip it over. Feel a lot less resistance with the ceramic side. Obviously, any knife with a secondary or a micro bevel is by far the easiest, will be a lot easier to feel sharpen. Most folders, I have noticed with my spider cores, they've got quite a pronounced secondary on them, and they are better done at home, but this will get you by. If you haven't got a strop, a little tip, nice straight piece of wood, just drop it on that. And you can add a compound as well if you want, if you had, you know, if you lost your strop. And you're not going to be able to see this, but I can actually see a slight amount of steel particles on here. Obviously the leather belt is a classic, but with a leather belt, unless you pull it really tight, you're going to get quite the convex on it. So stropping with a leather belt is something I haven't done a very, very long time. See how sharp it is on my bald arms. Sharp, shaving sharp. Yep, nice edge. Shave this up now. So that micro convex is actually shaving better than when this came out of the box. So an improvement, which took literally minutes. Folder, same thing exactly, same way to sharpen it. Got that tiny little bevel on it, easy peasy. And I'm going to use something different for this. I've got a little bar here which I have had for very many years, and this is a small, I think is made by Smith's USA, and this is a very small ceramic rod with all different edges on it, so you can sharpen fishing hooks. You could even sharpen a spoon knife on there. I would advise stropping afterwards, mine. Same thing again, bevel on flat, lift it up slightly. Now I'm feeling a bit more resistance with this rod than the DC. Must be a little bit coarser. But then you don't want a polished edge on a folder, because your main things for a folder is just cutting a bit of string, cutting your food up. Things that you can slip, especially cutting food, as I mentioned earlier with the ceramic plate. So micro serrations and a quick edge are probably slightly better on a folder than a polished edge. No, that's not even shaving. So I'm going to go onto a stone. It's not actually a stone, it's a small DMT. I've had this 30 plus years. It's a red, so it's a fine, but it is quite coarse. I can feel quite the resistance. My DMT diapholes, I've seen a lot more use in the last few years, so they actually do feel finer than this one. I actually bought this one just to put on a knife sheath years ago, because the stones you were getting in a knife sheath, you know, like a sheath knife, should we call it, from years ago, which you would now probably classed as a survival knife or a hunting knife. The stones that came in them were terrible, really coarse, and I bought this one. I can't even remember what knife it was now. It's been that long ago. Yeah, I can feel a rough edge. Well, it is actually shaving now. But that won't last that long because of the micro serrations. Axe, same thing again. Got my little axe with me today, my summer axe as I like to call it. I'll get the big stones out for this one. Now I usually sharpen these. I don't smoke. I usually sharpen these on my lineation belt with a nice fine 400 on there. But just to show you guys, I'll go on the red. Now I do actually need to clean this belt. So take a craft blade like a Stanley blade and just scrape it a few times. That does need a clean. That didn't take long to put a razor edge on, did it? Piece of cake. Field sharpening isn't a science. It's pretty straightforward. There's nothing difficult about it. Unless you want to do that zero scanty grind. Oh, leave it alone. So there we are, folks. A quick, easy field sharpening guide. Now, just to talk about zero scanty grinds, mine are steep. I do put a steep edge because I find it very resilient. I find it shaves wood better, and that's what I do. Now a lot of other guys who make bushcraft knives put a far shallower grind on than me, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, and if you were absolutely desperate, it would be easy to put a micro bevel on them. You know, I'm talking if you're out for a week or something and your knife's got a chip in it or it's really blunt, you've been using it hard, you know, you can put a micro bevel on them. You may think, oh, it works just fine like this, and leave a micro bevel on them, or you may go home and go, right, I've got an hour on the stones, I want to get it back to a zero. But mine, so there's quite a few people out there own mine knives. I would not suggest putting an emergency micro bevel on one of my knives because it's steep enough as it is. You put that micro bevel on and steepen it again, and it's not going to be able to cut much. So I'm just warning you. There are plenty of other ways to field sharpen. Don't just take my word for it. Plenty of other ways. I believe I've got a video out there where I sharpen an axe to a mirror polish on micro mesh strops. They work great. I use them in the workshop. I've stopped using really fine stones, so when I'm sharpening a knife now, I'll sharpen it on the DMTs and then I'll go on the micro mesh strops rather than going through all the palaver of going through water stones. I think if I was doing a few, I probably would use the water stones, but if I'm just doing one, I just pull the micro mesh strops out and they work a treat. So they are another method, but you know, you could do quite a few with them, and I say 6 inches by 2 inches is probably the best size. You can go smaller. Plenty of other ways, and yes, I've got quite a few videos with me sharpening stuff in the field and in the workshop. Please check them out. I will leave right at the end, I will leave one of them little box things, and I'll put a sharpening video in there, and I'll put my sharpening playlist in there for you. Well, thank you for watching. I appreciate your comments, I appreciate your views, and I certainly appreciate a thumbs up. Until the next time, ta-ra. Yes, field sharpening on easy tools. Start that again. And if that doesn't dry them twigs out, sorry, if that doesn't dry, start again. The Morse code, the Morse code. Start that again. In a minute, when I stop laughing internally. Well, that's my quick and simple guide to field sharpening your knife and your axe. And well, start that again. That was bloody awful.